Imagine a life-saving medical device manufacturing line, right? And it needs this urgent software patch.
Yeah, a critical update.
Exactly. There is a security vulnerability in the system, and the IT department, well, they can deploy the fix in about 10 minutes. But there is a catch.
There always is a catch.
Right. The quality assurance team, or QA, they require 10 weeks of documentation. Risk assessments, manual testing, just to prove that this 10-minute patch won't accidentally cause the assembly line to malfunction.
Because if it malfunctions, it could ultimately harm a patient.
Exactly. So who wins that battle?
Honestly, in most organizations, nobody wins. It just turns into this bitter, incredibly expensive standoff.
Yeah, a total gridlock.
Right. IT is pushing for speed, to prevent a cyber attack. Quality assurance slams on the brakes to prevent a compliance disaster. And the actual business just grinds to an absolute halt.
Which is exactly why you are here with us today. Whether you are actively managing compliance in a heavily regulated industry or, maybe you are just insanely curious about the invisible friction that powers these massive, high-stakes operations behind the scenes, you are in the perfect place.
It is a fascinating dynamic.
It really is. Today, we are doing a deep dive into a piece from Validfor. It's titled Bridging Quality and IT, Building a Unified Validation Framework Across Departments.
And that was written by their CEO and co-founder, Omer Simon.
Right. Our mission today is basically to decode this notorious turf war between QA and IT and extract the blueprint for a system that actually turns compliance from this massive bottleneck into a true competitive advantage.
Yeah, and to really understand the solution, we first have to understand what a validation framework actually does.
Because it sounds like corporate jargon.
Oh, it totally sounds like jargon. But in a regulated space like pharmaceuticals, biotech, or medical devices, validation is literally the mathematical and documentary proof that a system is fit for its intended use.
Okay, so proving it does what it's supposed to do.
Exactly. Like if you have a database storing clinical trial results, validation is the unbreakable chain of evidence proving that the database does exactly what it claims to do. Securely, every single time.
And getting that wrong is, well, it's catastrophic.
Or entirely. If a regulatory body like the FDA walks in and you cannot produce that proof, they don't just, write you a fine.
Right. They can shut you down.
They can halt your production entirely. You're looking at massive audit risks, potentially recalled products, and just millions of dollars evaporating, all because you couldn't prove your digital environment was under control.
So the stakes are incredibly high, which makes this standoff between quality assurance and IT so dangerous.
It really does.
If they are both technically responsible for ensuring the system works, why are they constantly at each other's throats?
Because, fundamentally, their metrics for success are totally opposed. Quality assurance is structurally designed to be a pessimist.
A pessimist. Okay, I like that.
Yeah, their entire job is to focus on proof, mitigate risk, and ensure absolute unwavering compliance. They look at a system and ask, how could this break, and how do I prove it won't?
Whereas IT
is built to be an optimist. They are driven by system uptime, rapid deployment, keeping the business moving. They look at the exact same system and ask, how fast can we get this running for the users?
I read a case study recently that perfectly illustrates this. So a manufacturing plant had their IT department push a critical overnight network patch to keep their servers secure.
Standard IT procedure.
Not only standard, but they didn't run the timing by QA. And that patch happened to overwrite a validated test script on the actual manufacturing floor.
Oh, no.
Yeah. When the morning shift arrived, the automated assembly line was dead. And the line didn't just go down for a day, production halted for 3 weeks.
3 weeks?
3 weeks. Because QA had to manually reconstruct the entire audit trail to prove to regulators that the newly patched environment was actually safe to use.
See, that is a brilliant example of the vocabulary mismatch that Omer Simon highlights in the Validfor piece.
The language barrier.
Exactly. QA speaks the language of, traceability, evidence, and change control. IT speaks in agile deployment, patches, and tickets.
They aren't even using the same dictionary.
No, they aren't. So without shared definitions, the very concept of a safe update means something completely different depending on which side of the room you are sitting on.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's like two people trying to build a house together, right?
Okay. Yeah.
One person is the QA department. They are agonizing over the structural integrity of the concrete foundation, reviewing the city permit for every single load-bearing wall and calculating maximum wind resistance.
Very pessimistic.
Exactly. And the other person is IT. They already have the moving truck idling in the driveway, and they just want to wire the electricity, turn the lights on, and move the furniture in.
And when those two builders refuse to speak the same language, they basically start building their own separate blueprints.
Which sounds like a nightmare.
It is. The real-world consequence of this disconnect is a chaotic duplication of effort. Because they aren't aligned, IT maintains its own change logs and deployment records.
While QA is doing what?
QA is building its own massive binders of risk assessments and test scripts, and I guarantee you, when an auditor asks to see them, those two sets of documents will not match.
Which is the ultimate nightmare scenario. An FDA inspector asks for the validation history of a specific software module. QA hands them a 400-page physical binder. IT pulls up a digital JIRA dashboard, and the timestamps just don't align.
And the inspector immediately knows the system is not under cohesive control.
Right.
That loss of cohesive control is precisely why the industry is desperately pivoting toward what the author calls a unified validation framework.
So it's not just a nice idea, it's becoming a necessity.
Absolutely. And this is not just an internal cultural initiative either. The regulatory bodies themselves are demanding it.
Really? The regulators are pushing for this.
Yeah. The source points heavily to industry standards like GAMP5, which is Good Automated Manufacturing Practice, and the FDA's Computer Software Assurance Guidance, known as CSA.
Okay, CSA.
Both of these frameworks represent a massive philosophical shift. They are actively pushing the industry to prioritize critical thinking over excessive blind paperwork.
Wait, I have to challenge that premise because that sounds incredibly risky.
How so?
We are talking about heavily regulated industries where, a software glitch could literally compromise a pacemaker or mislabel a toxic chemical. Are you saying the FDA is actually suggesting that producing less paperwork is somehow the safer move?
Essentially, yes.
How does reducing documentation not immediately compromise patient safety?
I understand the hesitation. I really do. But it actually increases safety by reallocating human attention.
Reallocating attention.
All right. The mechanism making this work safely is the principle of proportionality.
Proportionality. What does that look like in practice?
Well, under older paradigms, companies were so terrified of audits that they applied maximum documentation to literally everything.
Just to be safe.
Exactly. They would spend the same amount of time validating the font size on an internal HR portal as they would validate the algorithm that calculates a drug dosage.
Oh, wow. Which means the QA team is just exhausted and completely missing the forest for the trees.
Exactly. They're burning out on trivial updates. The CSA guidance introduces a highly structured, risk-based approach.
Yeah.
You tie your validation effort directly to the level of risk the software poses to patient safety or product quality.
So high risk means high documentation.
Right. If a system function has a high risk, meaning a failure directly impacts human life, it requires formal, highly rigorous, heavily scripted testing with massive documentation.
And what if it's low risk?
If it's a low-risk function like a back-end administrative reporting feature that never even touches product data, you utilize unscripted or ad hoc testing. You verify it works, you log the result, and you move on.
The paperwork is strictly proportional to the peril.
I love that phrasing. Yes. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, that fundamentally changes the dynamic between the two departments.
Because they have to agree on the risk level first.
Exactly. If you apply that proportionality, QA and IT have to align at the very beginning of the project. IT has to explain the technical architecture so QA can accurately assess the compliance risk. They negotiate the testing level together, which strips out all that wasted effort.
Which brings us to how this is actually physically executed. Because, a shared philosophy is great, but an auditor needs a physical trail.
Right, they need evidence.
So the Unified Validation Framework maps out a distinct step-by-step life cycle from the moment a system is conceived to the day it is retired.
Yes, the validation life cycle.
Let's ground this in reality. Walk us through how a piece of software moves through this life cycle. Let's say a pharmaceutical warehouse needs a new cloud-based temperature monitoring system to ensure vaccines don't spoil. Where does the unified framework actually start?
It starts with planning and scoping. Before IT buys anything or QA writes a single rule, they sit down and define the system's intended use and its overarching risk level.
So getting on the same page from day one.
Exactly. This is also where they determine which specific regulatory guidelines apply. For a digital system like your temperature monitor, the most critical guideline is 21 CFR Part 11.
Oh, man. That acronym gets thrown around constantly in compliance circles.
It does. It's foundational.
Break down the actual mechanics of 21 CFR Part 11 for us. Why is it the backbone of digital validation?
Well, Part 11 is the FDA's regulation regarding electronic records and electronic signatures.
Okay.
Think about it this way. Before computers, if someone verified a temperature check, they signed a paper logbook with wet ink.
Right, a physical signature.
Yeah, and you could physically examine that paper to see if the signature was forged or if the date was altered. But when you move to a digital click, say, a warehouse manager clicking approve on a digital dashboard, you completely lose that physical paper trail.
Because it's just pixels on a screen.
Exactly. So Part 11 mandates the cryptographic and systemic controls to prove that digital click is just as legally binding as physical ink.
So we are talking about underlying mechanisms like digital checksums and hashing.
Yes, exactly. When a record is signed under Part 11, the system must mathematically lock the file. It generates a unique cryptographic hash, like a digital fingerprint that guarantees the file hasn't been tampered with.
Wow.
It also strictly controls who has the system permissions to apply that signature in the first place. And it creates an invisible, unalterable audit trail logging the exact second the action occurred.
That technical rigidity feeds directly into the next phase of the life cycle, right? Which is requirements and risk assessment.
Yes, the requirements phase.
This is where QA and IT write clear, testable requirements for the software. But instead of just a massive wish list, every single requirement is structurally linked to a specific risk.
Right, going back to proportionality.
Exactly. If the temperature monitor needs an alert function, the risk of that alert failing is high, so the testing protocol is flagged as high rigor.
And you cannot forget supplier qualification in this process either.
What does that mean for our hypothetical warehouse?
Well, since your temperature monitor is cloud-based, you are relying on a third-party software vendor. Regulators do not care if AWS or Microsoft makes a mistake.
The liability is entirely yours.
Completely yours.
Yeah.
You have to formally validate that the vendor has their own strict quality controls in place. You are essentially validating the tool you use to do the validation.
Okay, which takes us to the verification and testing phase.
Okay.
This is where all of this data is actually generated.
Yes.
And here's where it gets really interesting. If there is one concept from the Validfor piece that every single person listening needs to absorb, regardless of their industry, it is the standard for data integrity.
Oh, absolutely. The LCOA principles.
Yes. The source introduces the LCOA principles. This is basically the absolute golden rule for record keeping.
LCOA is the bedrock of trust in any data system. The acronym stands for attributable, legible, contemporaneous, original, and accurate.
Okay, let's break those down. Because if your data fails, even one of these 5 criteria.
It is effectively useless in a regulatory audit.
Right, so let's look at the mechanics. Attributable.
Attributable means the system explicitly ties a piece of data to the unique individual who created or modified it. There are absolutely no shared generic login credentials allowed.
You can't just have a warehouse admin one login.
Nope. It has to be John Smith, logged in with his specific credentials.
Makes sense. Now, I always found legible interesting because people assume it just means deciphering terrible doctor handwriting.
Right, like old paper charts.
Yeah. But in the context of enterprise software, legibility is a massive technical hurdle.
It is a huge issue.
Yeah.
In a digital context, legible means the data must be readable and accessible for the entire retention period, which, by the way, could be decades.
Decades.
Decades. If you stored clinical data on a proprietary 1998 Oracle database format, and today's FDA inspection software cannot parse that deprecated file type, your data is no longer legible.
And you fail the audit.
You fail the audit.
Wow. Then we have contemporaneous, which I think is where most normal companies fail. It means the data was recorded at the exact time the event took place.
At the exact time, not an hour later.
Right. And I want you, the listener, to think about this in the context of your own work. If you are trying to reconstruct a project timeline from memory a week after it finished, and you are just now filling in your spreadsheets, your data is already compromised.
Because memory isn't perfect.
Exactly. It's a psychological fact that memory degrades.
This is why I love the forensic chain of custody analogy for the next principle, which is original.
Oh, the murder trial analogy.
Yes. In a murder trial, if a detective bags a piece of evidence but fails to log the timestamp and seal the bag immediately, the evidence is thrown out of court.
It doesn't matter how guilty the suspect is.
Exactly. The chain of custody is broken. In data systems, original means the record is the primary source data.
So no transcribing.
Right. If a machine prints a physical temperature ticket and an operator manually transcribes that number into an Excel sheet, the Excel sheet is not the original data. It is a copy where human error could easily be introduced.
And finally, accurate, meaning the data reflects reality without errors or omissions. So if you pass all 5 of those LCOA checks, your testing is complete. You summarize the validation in a report, you hand the system over to the operations team, and the life cycle is finished.
I actually have to stop you there because that is the most common and dangerous misconception in IT.
Wait, it doesn't end there.
Validation does not end at go live. A software system is a living organism. It evolves. Operating systems are updated, security patches are applied, user roles change.
Oh, right.
Every single update carries a mathematical risk of breaking a function that was previously validated.
Right, which brings us to change control and periodic review. You can't just set it and forget it. You have to continuously monitor the system's compliance state. But realistically, a complex philosophy like ALCA and risk proportionality that will completely collapse without strict human accountability. I mean, if both QA and IT are in charge, then nobody is really in charge.
That is exactly why governance is so critical. Governance is the engine that keeps the framework moving.
So how do you structure that?
The Validfor piece stresses the necessity of absolute clarity regarding who does what. They recommend a RACI matrix.
A RACI matrix.
Yes, mapping out exactly who is responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed for every single step of the validation process.
I am going to push back again on that because I have seen hundreds of RACI matrices built in these beautifully color-coded Excel sheets, emailed out to the company, and then literally never opened again.
Oh, I've seen that too.
Right. A matrix doesn't enforce behavior.
You are entirely correct, which is why the matrix is just the documentation of the governance. It is not the governance itself.
Okay, so what actually enforces it?
To enforce it, the framework requires a cross-functional council. You hold mandatory structured reviews between quality, IT, and the business owners. You force them into a room to review upcoming software releases and align on the risk proportionality before a single line of code is touched.
Just getting everyone talking.
Transparency is what kills the tension.
The source also emphasizes the need for practical SOPs, standard operating procedures. The critical insight here is that an SOP should not just be a tyrannical list of demands.
Nobody wants to read that.
Right. It must explicitly link the procedural steps to the why of the regulations. If an IT developer understands why an electronic signature prevents a dangerous drug from hitting the market, they are significantly less likely to try and shortcut the code.
Absolutely. But we have to address the elephant in the room here.
It's the technology.
Yes. If an organization tries to manage this level of complex governance, the risk assessments, the cross-functional alignments, the Part 11 cryptographic signatures, the LCOA data integrity checks, it's massive. And if they attempt to do it using manual spreadsheets in a shared SharePoint drive, they will fail.
It's like trying to direct air traffic at a major airport using only a clipboard and a whistle.
That is exactly what it's like. The sheer volume of metadata generated by modern software deployment makes paper-based validation structurally obsolete.
Which brings us to the technological solution Omer Simon presents, Validfor. This is a digital, AI-powered validation platform designed specifically to house this unified framework.
A single source of truth.
But we throw the term AI around constantly. How does a platform like this actually utilize artificial intelligence to force QA and IT into sync? Like, what is the actual mechanism? Well, it acts as a dynamic intelligence system. When you use a centralized platform, the AI isn't just a chatbot, It is actively using natural language processing, or NLP, to analyze the data.
Give me an example of how that works. Sure. For example, when QA writes a requirement in the system, the NLP algorithm reads the text, understands the context of the regulatory risk, and automatically suggests the appropriate test script based on historical data.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It mathematically links the requirement, the risk level, and the test into an unbreakable digital chain.
So it completely eliminates the human error of cross-referencing 3 different spreadsheets to see if a test was actually completed.
Entirely.
Let's look at how this transforms the workflow using our pharmaceutical warehouse temperature monitor. It starts before a single piece of hardware is even bought. The warehouse manager requests the system inside Validfor.
Right. And in a traditional setup, IT would just take that request and go buy it.
But here,
the platform automatically routes the intake to both QA and IT. They review the intended use simultaneously. The system prompts them to assign a risk level right out of the gate, establishing the validation plan parameters before any actual work begins.
Then they move to step 2, defining requirements. And this is where the platform really flexes. As they input the technical requirements, the software automatically builds the traceability matrix in the background.
It does it for you.
Yeah. If IT logs a change request to a specific function, the platform flags the associated QA risk and alerts the team that a retest is required.
And when it is time for step 4,
Mhm.
configuration and testing, the execution happens entirely within the platform's ecosystem.
So no jumping between apps.
None. IT configures the temperature monitor, while QA reviews the AI-assisted test scripts. When the test is run, Validfor captures the result directly, grabs the Part 11 compliant electronic signature, and logs the exact timestamp.
If something fails, say, the temperature alert just doesn't trigger the deviation is logged, investigated, and digitally approved right there. No one is emailing a Word document back and forth asking for a signature. And finally, when the system is ready, step 5, the platform automatically generates a comprehensive summary report pulling from all that interconnected data. QA and IT digitally sign off, and the system enters production with a flawless, instantaneous audit trail.
It's beautiful, really. So if we pull back from the specific software and look at the larger implications, what we are really discussing is a fundamental paradigm shift in corporate operations.
So what does this all mean?
Resolving the tension between QA and IT isn't just about surviving your next FDA audit. It is about establishing a shared vocabulary. It is about moving away from blind, fear-based paperwork and utilizing risk-based critical thinking.
It is the realization that you simply cannot run a 21st century compliance operation using 20th century tools.
You really can.
You have to embrace digital automated platforms to handle the heavy lifting of traceability and metadata so your human experts can actually focus on strategy, safety, and innovation.
I do think this raises an important question about the future, though.
Oh.
Well, the Validfor framework perfectly solves the current tension by digitizing the validation lifecycle and ensuring periodic reviews. But consider the trajectory of artificial intelligence.
Okay, things are moving fast.
Extremely fast. We are approaching a threshold where machine learning systems are dynamically writing, optimizing, and updating their own code in real time based on live environmental data.
Wait, meaning the system is changing its own fundamental architecture minute by minute?
Exactly. If a system is autonomously altering its code every single second, the concept of a periodic human review becomes instantly obsolete.
Oh, wow. I didn't even think of that.
Right? How do you validate a foundation that shifts while you're standing on it? It implies that the next evolution of compliance will have to become a fully autonomous, second-by-second AI function itself. Essentially, an AI auditor constantly testing the AI developer.
That is a staggering thought. The idea that human QA and human IT might eventually have to hand the keys over to two competing artificial intelligences just to keep up with the speed of innovation.
It's going to be a wild ride.
Yeah. It completely redefines what trust in a digital system looks like. Thank you for joining us on today's deep dive. We hope this exploration helped illuminate the invisible frameworks holding up the most critical systems in our world. Keep questioning the technology you rely on, keep looking for the unified solutions in your own work, and keep diving deep.